Hello, everybody. Today you are going to be learning a little bit more about how World War II began, and more specifically, how the British and the French tried to handle or deal with Adolf Hitler and the Nazis' aggression in Europe. Remember how World War I ended. Versailles stripped Germany of some of its land, they limited the German military, and they stripped Germany's colonies away from Germany. So one of the goals for Adolf Hitler is to rebuild the German Empire. And Hitler calls this German Empire the Third Reich because it is the third time that Germany would be reborn or created. The First Reich was the Holy Roman Empire. The Second Reich was when Otto von Bismarck, if you remember him, united Germany in the late 1800s. And Hitler predicted that this Third Reich would last 1,000 years. Luckily, he was off by 990 or so years, so that's good. But Adolf Hitler began his quest to build this Reich, or this empire, with something called the Anschluss, and that is when the Nazis essentially marched into Austria and took over Austria. Now, when the Nazis sent their military into Austria, the world was stunned, but Adolf Hitler justified it in a very interesting way. If you remember, during World War I, U.S. President Woodrow Wilson talked about how ethnic groups should have the right to be in their own country, so that they should be able to live as a majority in a country, not a minority in someone else's country. Well, does anyone remember what Woodrow Wilson called this idea? Oh, I know. Nationalism. It's similar to nationalism, but it's not exactly the same. Oh, I know. Ethnocentrism. Actually, that idea was called self-determination. That's what I said. I said self-determination. Everybody heard me say? That's not what you said. You said nationalism and you said ethnocentrism. You did not say self-determination. Whatever, brah. Okay, so Adolf Hitler used U.S. President Woodrow Wilson's idea of self-determination to argue that because there were many German-speaking people in Austria, that Austria should join with Germany. And in fact, Hitler used this same argument with Czechoslovakia. Hitler said, well, there are a lot of ethnic Germans who live in Czechoslovakia, so why should German-speaking people live in Czechoslovakia? They should have the self-determination to join with Nazi Germany. So this demand of Adolf Hitler's, Hitler demanded that the Sudetenland of Czechoslovakia become part of Germany, and Hitler threatened that if the Sudetenland of Czechoslovakia did not join with Germany, that he was going to invade Czechoslovakia and take it over by force. This created a crisis, and the British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, who's pictured here on the left, he flew to Germany twice to try and talk Adolf Hitler down from this threat of war. And what followed was a meeting called the Munich Conference. And at this conference, the major question was, would a part of Czechoslovakia just be given to Adolf Hitler and the Nazis in Germany? And ultimately, what ended up happening, and by the way, Czechoslovakia was not even invited to this meeting, what ended up happening is that the French and the British decided to hand over the Sudetenland to Adolf Hitler. And Adolf Hitler promised that there would be no more demands for land, that this was it. He wouldn't make any more demands. He would be happy with this little bit of land. So the Munich Conference is an example of what we call appeasement. And that word you need to know, appeasement. Appeasement is when you give in to a bully because you just want the bully to stop bothering you, and you hope that the bully will be happy with what you've given them. But like a crying baby who drinks a bottle, after a while that baby's going to want, another bottle. Or a more precise example for this would be a wolf. That if you give a wolf meat, they'll eat it, but eventually when they're hungry, they're going to come back for more. By the way, I just want to point out something peculiar about this photo of the Munich Conference. Doesn't Mussolini look like he's trying to figure out who dealt it? And he kind of is looking like it might have been Hitler, just as a side note here. So this Munich agreement, where the British and the French gave Nazi Germany part of Czechoslovakia, has become infamous as a deal with the devil. That the British and the French just did not want to go to war over Czechoslovakia, so they just gave Czechoslovakia to Adolf Hitler. This is a photo of Chamberlain returning from the Munich conference with a signed agreement between Adolf Hitler and Britain and France, and also Italy was there, that this would be peace, that now Germany would be happy that they got what they wanted and there would be no other demands. Now we know, of course, that Germany is going to make quite a few demands. So in the assignment for today, you guys are going to have to look at political cartoons regarding this issue of appeasement. You're going to have to analyze these political cartoons. And you have to keep in mind, when you look at a political cartoon, what you're looking at is not literal. Everything is a symbol of something else. So you really have to break down, what do all of the images and symbols in the cartoon really mean? Because it's not what they actually are. Like, for example, this is not a woman drowning in the ocean with a life preserver being thrown to her. Everything represents something else, what's going on. Right? This is not a row of people being pushed over by another person. Each person symbolizes something, and the pushing symbolizes something else that was going on in Europe at this time. And my favorite appeasement cartoon is this one, where you have Chamberlain, the British Prime Minister, dressed as a nursemaid, trying to take care of the crying baby, who is, of course, Adolf Hitler, by giving him what he wants. Now, one outspoken leader in Britain was Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill, from the beginning, was against appeasement, and he thought the only way to teach a bully a lesson is to punch him in the face. Winston Churchill was in favor of strengthening the British military, strengthening their alliances, and putting pressure on Germany and forcing Hitler to back off. It turns out that Winston Churchill was actually correct, because not only did Germany take the Sudetenland, which they were given at the Munich conference, a few months later Germany took over all of Czechoslovakia. So without any shots being fired, without winning any battles, Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party were able to increase Germany's size to include Austria and Czechoslovakia. And that is why Winston Churchill was so against appeasement. He felt that giving in to Hitler would just make Hitler even more bold. That would give Hitler more power. And it turns out that Churchill was correct, because in 1939, Germany would invade Poland. And that is what will trigger the start of World War II. So with all of this information in mind, please answer the questions based on the political cartoons about appeasement. All right, guys, email me if you have any questions. Stay in and stay safe.